When graphing the sine and cosine functions, we have to start with the equation. So this is what the sine equation would look like. This is what the cosine equation would look like, except all of the letters, except for x and y, are going to have some number in there. So D, A, B, and C will all have a numerical value. If, let's say, you don't have plus some number on the outside, that just means that your D value is 0, so you wouldn't have that um, vertical shift. So you can also write these having the plus D on the opposite side. So instead of it being here, it could be plus D after the parentheses. And each of these letters are going to represent a different change in the graph. So we're first going to start with talking about A, which represents amplitude. So amplitude, before we get into what that is, we need to know what an axis of symmetry is. And for these functions, it's going to be a horizontal line. It is the halfway line between the highest and lowest point on sine x or the cosine x function. Um, so for the parent function, that axis of symmetry is the x-axis, but if you shift up or down, it will change. So the amplitude is the height of the curve above the axis of symmetry, and also below, and it is determined by the absolute value of A. So our amplitude is always positive. So that means that to find the range, we always have the negative amplitude going to the positive amplitude. So you can write it like in interval notation, like if your A is 2, it would be -2 to +2. So if A is positive, which it always should be, it's a normal curve, but if you have a negative, let's say it was -2, then that would mean it's a reversed curve. Reversed. So now, if A is greater than 1, that is going to vertically stretch your graph up. If it is less than 1, it is going to shrink it. And if it equals 1, that means there's no change. So depending on your height, you'll either be stretching your graph up or stretching it down. And it does represent the highest point and the lowest point. So it's going to affect the y values of the maximum and minimum of the critical points. We'll get more into that when we talk about graphing. And to find the amplitude from a graph, count how many spaces up from the axis of symmetry your highest point is. So it's like your axis of symmetry is halfway between your 2 points, and then that way it should divide up and down equally. So as an example, if we take a look at this example here, if I asked you what is the amplitude of this graph, you would tell me 2, because the amplitude is always A, which is the number in front of sine or cosine. So in this example, since 2 is in front of sine, that would be my amplitude. If this was a negative, my amplitude is still 2, but it would be a reversed curve. So it'd be a reflection. So it would be flipping, and going the opposite direction.